Hello everyone, welcome to the webinar on serverless architecture on AWS. I'm Kopal Sharma from CloudDart Technologies. I will be your anchor for this webinar. I take this opportunity to briefly introduce CloudDart Technologies and our presenter for today, Himanshu Sachdeva. CloudDart is the first company in India to provide cloud consulting, cloud training, and cloud managed services for mid-market and enterprise clients around the world. With expertise in major cloud platforms including AWS and Microsoft Azure, we are uniquely positioned to be the single technology source for organizations looking to utilize the flexibility and power cloud computing provides. We provide custom training to quickly empower IT professionals and corporates on cloud and big data technologies. We have presence in Mumbai, Bangalore, USA and UK, but also offer on-site and pre-scheduled public batches in different IT-centric cities of India and overseas. Till date, we have trained more than 5,000 IT professionals and conducted corporate trainings for some of the Fortune 500 companies, which includes GE, PwC, TCS, HP, SAP, Fidelity, Oracle, Philips, Flipkart, L&T and Samsung, just to name a few. Himanshu Sachdeva, a presenter, is a senior cloud solutions architect with CloudDart Technologies. He has been architecting and developing IT applications for over 10 years and has been working in cloud computing domain for more than 5 years now. He holds expertise in various cloud platforms including AWS, Force.com, Google App Engine, etc. and has designed large and complex applications for some of the major international companies. He is one of the first in the world to attain AWS Certified Solutions Architect professional level certification. He also has working experience of deployment automation tools like Chef, DevOps, microservices and IoT. We also have Prathit Mehta, Ashwin Ram and Arman as our moderators for today's webinar. During the webinar, in case if you have any questions, please drop in your query on the chat and we will take it up at the end. And also, we have a surprise which Himanshu will be relieving later. Over to Himanshu now.
Uh, hello everybody. This is Himanshu. Sorry for the delay. There was some technical issue with the audio. I hope all of you are able to hear now. So just give us a minute and we'll just get started. All right, I guess we are good to go. So thanks everybody for joining on Saturday morning. As part of the session, we'll be discussing a couple of things related to serverless architecture. We will be talking about things like what really is serverless design or serverless architecture, and why the entire industry is so crazy about it these days. A lot of people are planning to move their applications or migrate their applications into serverless design. So we'll definitely try to look into some kind of benefits that serverless design provides. We will also look into the services and AWS components that let you enable serverless design, or you can come up with an architecture on top of AWS and make it happen without the use of real servers. And we will also look into some of the reference architectures. We'll also look into some of the reference architectures, which are for some specific use cases, and we'll also look into a demo. I'll show you a small application I built on top of my Amazon account that will give you an idea how things can be done without involving EC2 instances. So as part of this entire session, this is going to be a semi-technical session. So it's if you're a technology professional, that's perfect. If you're coming from an infrastructure or cloud background, it'll definitely help. But if you're not having cloud background, it's okay. Maybe you will be able to pick up few new things from this session. If some people who already have backgrounds on AWS, it'll be like a little more informative to them. At the same time, this entire session will talk about some of the design patterns and some good practices. So even if you are from the business side, you are a technical manager, or you are from the project side, not a completely hands-on person, then also I think this session will help you understand what is the latest technology and new trends in the market, so that you can plan your projects and pitch to your clients and manage your team who has been working on similar projects. Right. So with that context, we'll get started, and we'll try to look into why we are moving to this direction, serverless. And to do that, we'll need to understand from where we are coming. So we'll need to understand how the computing has evolved over last couple of decades. So if you look into things that a couple of decades before, we had physical servers. That is where people would deploy their applications into. These physical servers would sit into the office of the client, on-premise servers, or sometimes private data centers, where you put multiple machines together, connect them over the network, and just deploy your applications and let your customers access those applications. So, but with time we realize it's managing hardware or working with hardware is actually a good amount of overhead. So the industry moved towards something called virtual servers. So things like VMware and some of the other virtualization technologies became very popular. And at that time, it was becoming a little easy for the operations team and for the technology team to manage things. So they were getting better agility. So as you can see, if you move from left to right, the rightmost being the serverless, you get a good amount of agility in the way you perform operations or you manage your infrastructure or your applications. But at the same time, you also get benefited by having less responsibility. So both ways, it's a win-win situation. That's the reason, why we are moving from physical to virtual. And now these virtual servers are no longer needed to sit inside your office. These VMs, the third thing that you can see on the slide, these VMs are now on the cloud vendors data center. So whenever you use Microsoft Azure or Amazon Web Services or any other cloud, essentially what you get is a virtual server, but you don't manage the underlying physical hardware. That's what your cloud vendor manages for you. So as an end customer, you even get, you can be a little more happy because you don't need to now manage the underlying hardware. It's no longer your responsibility, and it's even faster for you. You get to operate at a larger scale because their data centers are probably bigger than what you require. At the same time, you can anytime discard an old server, create a new one. So having cloud definitely gave a pace of operation. It has increased the pace of operations, and the entire deployment life cycle has become little faster. And containers is something which is even making it more fast. So this is what is another level of virtualization on top of uh, virtual or physical servers. So in case you have heard about terms like Linux containers or Docker, you might be able to relate to it. But if not, that's okay. That's just another, computing paradigm that's getting popular these days. So the idea is we are abstracting things on top of each other. On physical server, we have virtual servers. On virtual servers, we have containers. And nowadays, people don't even want to work with operating systems or servers anymore. That's the direction we are going into. We are going to the serverless side, where you get, a really easy way to do things as a developer, as an application developer. Now your responsibility is only to write the business logic and just make it integrate your business logic and your application with some other thirds. Uh, but you are no longer responsible to manage the underlying server, the operating system, the hard disk space, the RAM, CPU, and all those things are no longer your responsibility. So, and if at the same time it gives you a good amount of performance and security and reliability, then probably you might not need to go back. So I'm not saying that this can be used in every kind of situation, but definitely some of the workloads, some of the use cases, which we will also discuss at the end of the presentation, make sense for you to use serverless instead of deploying your applications on physical or virtual servers. Right. So let's try to look into what are the problems that are there with the real servers, and why are people trying to move out of it. The very first thing is, let's say if you have a web application, then you need to ensure that there's some minimum number of servers up and running. You cannot shut them in the night, because although you might be having minimum traffic during the night time, maybe few users might still come to your website. So just to cater to those few users, you'll still have to keep your machines up and running. And if it's a business critical application, you'll definitely need to maintain more than one, because you cannot have one machine or one server as a single point of failure. So you need to have redundancy in place. So that's one thing, you need to ensure that you have minimum number of machines. You need to ensure the failover part of it. You need to constantly keep checking the health of it and perform maintenance operations on it. So essentially what lies in your responsibility areas are like capacity planning. Depending upon the amount of traffic or the amount of workload being generated, you decide how many machines you need, what should be their RAM, what should be their storage space, what should be their CPU size, and probably you should also do some capacity projection that probably after 2 months or after 6 months, this is what I'll need depending upon how my business is growing. So you should be ready for it. If you are in a physical domain, you should be ready like much before, and you should over provision. If you are in a virtual domain, or if you are working on cloud, then yes, provisioning is little easy, because then you can get these EC2 instances from AWS whenever you need, and then release them when you don't need them. So, but anyway, you will still be responsible for doing capacity planning and provisioning. Or if you are on cloud, you'll be responsible to setting up auto configuration rules to make these things happen for you, so that machines launch and terminate based on certain rules and configurations that you define. At the same time, these machines now belong to you. You are the user, you are the root user and admin user of those machines. So you are responsible for doing entire configuration, installing the runtime, installing right patches and security updates and all those things to ensure that your machines are ready for the application to be deployed. And when the application is deployed, you are also responsible to do constant monitoring and see if there's any network connectivity issue you are getting, or application errors that you are getting, or some other kind of let's say CPU gone high which you are not expecting. So constant monitoring, and then probably related actions to it need to be taken. So overall, it becomes a huge responsibility. Major part of your effort still goes into the operations, when you should be spending your time into writing and building your applications, and because applications is what is your real business, right? Servers are just enablers for your applications. So ultimately, the overall idea is that yes, there's something which needs to be improved, things have improved by going to cloud and using virtualization, but this is not good enough. We need something more, and that's where the industry is moving towards. Essentially, when we talk about serverless architecture, if I would like to summarize in one line, this is like it's a fully managed system that can run your logic with multiple backing services. So essentially, you still own your application. It's your logic, your piece of code that runs somewhere. Now, since it's a piece of code, it requires some kind of computing. When we say serverless, it does not really mean that there's no server behind the scenes. There is one, but it's not visible to you and you don't own it. It's no longer your responsibility, right? So it's kind of implicit that it will run on a server and things just work. There's one particular statement that I like. This is by a person called Chris Turner, who's a director of engineering at a company called Applause based in Silicon Valley. So he said, like, our architecture does not include servers for the same reason it does not include electricity. It's kind of implicit that it would be there, right? You cannot do things without electricity. Similarly, you cannot do things without servers, but at the same time, you no longer need to notice or observe electricity. You never care about it, that it's on and how much voltage is flowing through my machines and all that, as long as it's on and it's getting the right things done for you. Similarly, if there are servers behind the scenes and they're getting the right thing done for you, which is essentially running your piece of logic, then you should be happy about it. So with that context, I'll try to give you some benefits of the serverless design. How is it better than a traditional regular application deployment on a physical or virtual server? So one is zero server administration. The reason is because you don't have access anymore. You don't know on what server this code will be running. So it's out of your bounds, which gives you, which frees you from maintaining and managing that server. So your administration is no longer your responsibility now. So you save your manpower and your time that you'll spend in administration. The other thing, apart from server administration, there are usually other things related to infrastructure, which might be your, backup operations, which might be your network connectivities and firewall rules and couple of, other configurable items. So now they are also not your responsibility anymore. And at the same time, things will seamlessly scale as and when more traffic or more volume of incoming requests come to your serverless setup, right? So if you do that, then you are no longer responsible even to manage the or do the scaling operations, right? Overall, it's the entire operations becomes easier and it's faster for your development teams to do more deployments, and that's what most of the organizations are moving towards these days, multiple deployments every day. So all of it boils down to a lower cost because of multiple reasons. One, that you don't have to invest manpower, so your resource rates go down. At the same time, you don't waste resources, you utilize to the optimum. For example, let's say, I'll give you a cost example here. Consider that you have to build an application which needs to serve 1 million requests from users every month. Okay, now this might be doing something, the users probably are uploading an image file and this application is converting this image into a grayscale or black and white and giving it back. So to make it a very simple design, you will at least need 2 EC2 instances, which I'm assuming I'm taking an M3 large machine of EC2. It comes with about 8 GB of RAM. 2 machines because I want to have redundancy in place. I don't want to have a single machine acting as a single point of failure. And along with it, I also put a load balancer to distribute traffic to these 2 machines. So if I do a quick maths, it comes out to be about $230 a month. And that's not all. There would be multiple other components. You'll be paying for bandwidth, you'll be paying for disk space and few more things which I've not included in these calculations yet. I'm just counting the bare minimum. But if you do the same thing using some of the services that Amazon provides, like API Gateway or Lambda, and they cater to 1 million requests in a month, you end up spending somewhere around $7 a month to do the same amount of work at a much lower cost. So definitely you get a cost benefit, as you can see here, and there have been, numerous benchmarkings that people have done. You can find such reports on internet where people have really realized that such kind of designs give you the best possible utilization of your infrastructure, and thereby giving you, a lower cost. So you don't have to spend so much money. This is why this type of setup is getting very popular these days. So if you just go to Google Trends and look for a search term serverless, that's the kind of graph you look into. So from January this year, the search on this particular term serverless has increased drastically, and that means multiple organizations, senior technical guys, a lot of these guys are interested into building serverless applications and serverless architectures. So now I'll that was, at very high level what you really need. Now let's go into little technical part and try to understand that how it works from the Amazon's perspective. There are multiple applications that Amazon gives to you. These are just some of them that I'm listing on the screen, which can help you come up with an architecture. Now, if you have worked with AWS in previously, you would have probably used some of these applications or some of these services already. Let's say you are building a web application, so definitely you will need to use a load balancer, RDS, or EC2 instance, and a couple of more services, probably an S3 bucket. Now, some of them are managed services, and some of them you manage. For example, an EC2 instance is something that you manage, so it would not be part of a serverless design. Usually, as a rule of thumb, the managed services or the machines that are not in your control are good candidates for serverless architectures. I'm not saying that every kind of managed service can be used in serverless design, but yes, as a starting point, you can think about these things. So we'll be discussing some of these services in detail as we go into the next slides. Starting with something called AWS Lambda. Now, this is a very interesting service. In case you have not heard about this before, it lets you create something called microservices without servers. So essentially, if you can write a piece of code and give it to Amazon, then Amazon will execute this code on runtime for you and will charge you only for the time that your code was executed. So it's an event-driven architecture, and it uses serverless computes. It's a serverless compute service. So now consider the same example I was, taking previously, where you have an application where people come and upload their image files, and you need to convert those images to grayscale and give it back. So essentially, each one of these requests can be handled independently by a unique Lambda function. So there can be multiple invocations of Lambda functions going on in parallel as users come to a website and present their, image file to you. So if it were an EC2 instance, then you would need to take care of scaling of it. If the number of users increase, you will set up auto scaling rules to increase the number of EC2 instances. But in Lambda, you don't need to do that. This is something that Amazon takes care of you. Amazon ensures that it launches as many Lambda operations in parallel so that there's no pending request. Everybody who comes to the Lambda service and say, hey, I have an image file, convert it for me, then another Lambda invocation will get started even when the previous ones are in progress, and it scales automatically. A lot of things happen behind the scenes, but yeah, ultimately you don't have to care about those things. So what kind of applications you can write, or what language you can use to write your code into? Right now, Lambda supports only 3 languages: Node.js, Python, and Java. And these languages might get increased in future. So you can, for the time being, write your applications or code only in these 3 languages. And unlike EC2 that charges you on per hour basis, Lambda functions charge you on every 100 milliseconds of execution time. So you actually utilize your resources to the optimum. I can give you an example here. Sometime back, there was a requirement that came to us, and one of our clients told that they need a cron job to be running every midnight to do certain activities, and these activities will be completed like within a span of half an hour. But they don't want this cron job to interfere with any other cron jobs or any other systems. So it needs to be set up on a completely different system. At that time, Lambda as a service was not available, so we had to launch a fresh EC2 instance and set a cron job there, which would run only at midnight for half an hour, do its work, and rest of the time the machine was up and running. So essentially, we were wasting 23.5 hours of compute time and the cost associated with it. Now, if we do it with Lambda, we'll be charged only for the execution time, right? So such kind of things are also called functions as a service. Now, that's a very generic term. Now, you would have heard things like software as a service, platform as a service, or infrastructure as a service. These are the core building blocks. But on top of it, you will hear terms like function as a service, database as a service. So these are like at an abstracted layer. So Lambda can also be termed as function as a service. So essentially, what you're giving is a function in Node.js or Python or Java, and it will execute that function. So there are some other function as a services available from different other cloud vendors. So Google has something called Google Cloud Functions. Microsoft Azure has something called Microsoft Azure Functions. Then IBM has another service. There are some third-party companies called Iron.io, Webtask.io. Almost everybody provides you similar kind of features where you provide your application code to them and they will run it on an event. So it's a request-based execution, request-based invocation of your code. Whenever something happens, they will execute your code and your code will do something, right? So what do you need to know, or if you want to work with any of these functions as a service, let's say specifically Lambda, since that's what we'll be focusing on to, but it applies to all the other ones as well, you should be thinking in a little different way. Unlike you write your code for a monolithic applications or your a very big Java project which includes multiple modules, that's not the kind of mindset that will be applicable when you are writing Lambda functions that can be used for serverless design. So ideally, you should be approaching it from a microservice design where your code pieces are small and do only a part of your job. And these code pieces, these individual functions are independent of each other. They don't communicate to each other. They don't have intrinsic dependency on each other. Yes, they can pass data back and forth by writing it to some persistent storage, and the next function can read it from that persistent storage. But two functions usually don't interact with each other. So they are small, they are short-lived. That's another very important property of these functions. They are short-lived. You cannot run long-living applications on it. You cannot have a entire website running on a Lambda for, let's say, a complete 1 year. That's not possible because there are certain constraints with it. Most of these functions have a timeout value. For example, Amazon Lambda will time out in 5 minutes. So whatever in process that is running will get aborted. So you have to design your code, you have to design your processing, your method in a way so that it completes the work within that time frame. Yes, you can do multiple of these functions. You can run multiple of them in parallel to make things fast for you, but try to not do a lot of processing as part of a single call. Another important fact to realize here is that you make your system stateless, which means don't save any data which you would like to persist inside your function or inside your variables or probably writing to a local disk, because the way these functions are executed on the backend infrastructure, they can run on any one of the servers that is in the fleet of your cloud vendor. Now, a Lambda function can work on a fleet of EC2 instances that Amazon is managing, but next Lambda function may or may not work on the same machine. It might be on a completely different machine. So if you're writing something to a disk, your next Lambda function might not be able to read it from the disk because it's in a completely different server behind the scenes. So as long as you respect these three principles, that your function should be small, short-lived, and stateless, you are almost halfway through and you are good to come up with a serverless design. One more thing, which you will need to come up with the serverless design is to make it interact with multiple other services. We call it backend as a service. Now there are multiple types of things that your functions might interact with. For example, users might interact with your Lambda function using something called API gateway, or your function might call an API gateway to interact with some third-party service. That's, by the way, API gateway is another service from Amazon. Your functions might need to interact with S3 or DynamoDB to persist your static or dynamic data. So you use, if you can notice, I'm using all these services which are managed services. API Gateway, S3, DynamoDB, Cognito. Cognito can manage user identities for you. So essentially, whenever somebody comes to your website and say, I need to log in, then you need to authenticate the login credentials with somebody. And that is where you go to. You go to Cognito service and check whether it's a valid user or not. So essentially, all of them are building blocks, and you will put these different services together into some design and come up with a serviceless design. There are things like CloudWatch alarms and log filters that can notify the SNS topics, which will alert you over emails or SMS if something goes wrong. So you have monitoring also in place as a service. You have notification available as a service, and there can be other backing services as well. Probably you would like to call another Lambda function based on the output of the first Lambda function. If output is A, then write to S3. If output is B, then call another one. So there can be chain of events that need to happen. Or you might want to call some third-party services outside Amazon. For example, we created an application sometime back here. Whenever certain monitoring metrics cross certain threshold values, we get a phone call by the system. So we integrated our CloudWatch notification, CloudWatch monitoring system with a third-party telephony provider called Twilio. So, and all of it was being done using Lambda and serverless and managed services. Talking about API gateway, because this goes in combination with AWS Lambda a lot. This is a very powerful combination. If you use API gateway with Lambda, you can come up with a RESTful interface for your code. Let's say you might have 2 or 3 different functions that you have written, and you want to front it with a RESTful web service interface so that people outside your organization or your clients can send their request, or maybe some third-party services can send a request to your function through this RESTful web service interface. That's what API gateway can provide to you. Probably in a little while I'll be showing a demo. I'll show how these things I have set up, which interact with each other, and they pass on the data and save that data back to some kind of database. Now, in the beginning I said, not every kind of application or not every kind of workload is suitable for a serverless design, but few things are. So there are few eligible workloads which you can think of. Mobile backends are a very decent one, where that it's kind of an event-based system. For example, when a mobile user does some activity, I can give an example here. Let's say you're playing a mobile game and you request to purchase an additional item or additional module of the game, right? So it's like an event which will happen when a person makes certain interaction, and it's not a recurring thing, right? And everybody can do it at whenever they want. So if you have a function which is listening to this particular event, then it can be a very good candidate for your mobile backend. There can be multiple other use cases as well. Similarly, you have use cases for file processing. The example I was giving you for image file transcoding from color to grayscale. You can create simple web applications. This is something that we tried recently, where we had a static website. When I say static website, this included standard HTML pages, images, CSS, JavaScript, but it was not coded in Java or PHP, any programming language, simple HTML. But there was a requirement that this static website should have a contact us page where it has a form which people can fill in, and you guys or the administrators should get an email whenever somebody fills a form, or at the same time this data should get updated into a database. Now, this is kind of requirement which, typically people will think of, okay, let's implement it in PHP. Let's write a web application to make it happen, and we'll have, some servlet sitting on the back end. If it's a Java-based setup, you decide to work with Java. So people, usually think of setting it up in a traditional way using servers, because now there's an interaction that needs to happen with backend and database and all those things. But this kind of thing can be taken care by standard managed services like API Gateway and Lambda. We were able to do that. Now, not only that, this contact us form writes to a database, it also sends a automatic reply back to the user, hey, we have received your query and we will revert back to you within 24 hours. All of it happened without running a single EC2 instance. And when I do that, I am not just keeping my EC2 instance idle, just waiting for somebody to fill the contact form and just paying the money to AWS or the cloud vendor, even when I'm not actively using it. Only when in my design, only when somebody fills the form, that's when I pay to Amazon to use those services. So these are very powerful applications or workloads which can be deployed using serverless designs. Things like IoT backends, pretty much similar to mobile backends, real-time stream processing, just like you did for images, you can do for log data. You analyze the log data. If you find some anomaly or there are too many error statements, then you take certain other action, right? So these are some of the eligible workloads for serverless designs. I can show you some reference architectures. So this is a voting application. It's a web application, but it was built to take votes from people on certain questionnaires. So there was a poll, and people were supposed to put their entries to it. So as you can see that the users are connecting through their smartphones or even web applications. Ultimately, where they reach is the API gateway. That's the entry point where they start interacting with your infrastructure. This API gateway sends their request to a Lambda function. Essentially, this was a telephony integration where people would send their vote by pressing a number, dial 1 to say I'm happy, dial 2 to say I'm unhappy. So that way, whatever number they are pushing goes to the Lambda function, and this Lambda function then write it to DynamoDB. That's where my voting data is persisted, so that I can get back to it who said I'm unhappy, so that my customer representatives can go back to the person and inquire the situation, what happened, and try to resolve the issue. And depending upon my logic, I can take more actions. If this is kind of an application where I would also like to report the statistics outside, how many percent people are happy with our services, then probably the same Lambda function can also write it as a HTML file, store it in S3 bucket, which I can display outside as a static website to people outside coming from Route 53 to my S3 page. Right, so in this entire process, I'm not using a single EC2 instance, and I will not be utilizing the resources when I don't need them. It's always on-demand resources for that particular event, whenever somebody wants to, vote something. So that's one design. Then we have something very similar. This is for a setup where machines can communicate certain data points to the backend machine services, and as you can see, probably most of these backend services are Kinesis, Lambda, DynamoDB, CloudWatch, S3. The idea here is I'm using all the backend services which are Amazon managed, and they will scale by themselves without my involvement or my intervention. So in case something goes wrong, or maybe there's a lot of data that's coming to my application, then things will scale on their own, and I don't need to worry about taking care of the scalability aspect, keeping backups, and involving my operations team to make it happen. Right. So there can be other use cases as well, but these two definitely make sense. In fact, this kind of design is becoming so popular that nowadays people have come up with open source projects for this. There's a project on GitHub. It's called Serverless, and it has got a huge number of stars, a lot of people committing to this project and contributing to this project. So what it lets you do is it lets you create an event-driven microservice setup which can be deployed to one or multiple cloud service providers. It has a very tight integration with AWS Lambda and API Gateway, but it also has integration with Azure Functions and Google Functions. So by adopting this framework while writing your application and your code, you can make it compatible to be deployed at multiple places and even more frequently without even logging into the management console. You can actually use this framework from your laptop. As a developer, you just type a command and your code gets deployed on the cloud function with the particular version of code you are sending at certain parameters to it and all that, right? So overall, this entire design, this entire phenomena of getting serverless is becoming very popular, as you could also recognize it from the Google Trends graph, and a lot of people are jumping to this bandwagon. We at CloudThat have been doing a lot of activities related to this domain in past, and we also have been conducting multiple trainings related to cloud in general and new design patterns and some specific design patterns on cloud when we have some specific request for it. So what I'll do is I'll show you a quick demo of a particular thing I created earlier. Now essentially this is an application where I'm sending the data to it over HTTP post, but I don't have a running server there, not an EC2 instance to listen to my HTTP post request. It's being sent to the API gateway, and somehow this data gets stored in the DynamoDB database, which is again serverless. And on the other hand, I will try to then call over the data. I'll try to pull the data and try to visualize it and see whether I'm really able to work with it. Now for this, I will be using something called a Postman client. So let me get started with this. I'll just share my screen. All right, I guess you can see my screen now. So this is the AWS Management Console. I'm already logged into the Management Console and I have some configurations already done. So what I'm trying to show you here is that I have a table in DynamoDB which is accepting certain data points which are being sent from outside. So essentially somebody needs to send data to this particular table. So basically write a query or write an API call to insert data inside my table. But I'll try to show you how to make it happen through a standard post request. So I have a client called Postman. So just give me 1 second. Okay, so I have this REST client, but ideally it could be anything. So right now I'm sending a particular payload, a message, which let me just show to you. So this is my message body. I'm sending tracking information, location tracking, my latitude and longitude, and some timestamp and some other tracking IDs to the database through this REST client. But the same thing can also be implemented on Android, as long as this Android phone has the internet connectivity. It can take your GPS coordinates and send it to the API gateway. Now, if you see here, this endpoint to which I'm doing the HTTP post call, it's actually a API gateway endpoint belonging to the Oregon region of AWS. So whenever I do that, it sends this particular payload to API gateway. API gateway will invoke the Lambda function and say, hey boss, I have received this data, do something with it. and depending upon my business logic, the code I've written, my Lambda function will take certain action. In this particular case, my code actually asks the Lambda function to insert the data into DynamoDB. If there's something is wrong with the data, if few required parameters are missing, then instead of inserting to the database, it responds back and says, hey, your data is incorrect. So that's a very standard business logic which I've written to make it happen. So let me send some information here. Sorry. Let me edit this value, and I can say I'm sending a data point with the device ID of Himanshu test, tracking ID of webinar, and on 7th of, or sorry, 6th of August. Now it's manually created values, but if you are doing it from an Android program or somewhere else from a device which is tracking the location information and sending it, these would be realistic values. But for now, I've sent something, right? So as soon as I do this, this is now trying to communicate with my API gateway. My API gateway is trying to invoke Lambda, and my Lambda is trying to write to DynamoDB. No servers involved, no EC2 instance. My request was successful. I have received a 200 series OK response with some parameters. Now, how do I really know that this data got inserted? I can go back to my AWS console and try to query on the particular tracking ID I gave there. So let me do that. I gave a tracking ID of webinar. Now, when I search on that, you see a data point has been inserted. Let me actually show you the details of it. This has some latitude, longitude. It has some time, which is the time for today, and a device ID of Himanshu test. This is precisely what I just, inserted to my database. Again, no servers involved. So for the entire operation, I probably was charged some microcents. So just think about, you can do millions of operations in less than $1. But the real power of it comes when you would like to present this data on a web application. So I have written a web application which is a static website. Let me show it to you. So this is a static HTML page which is right now sitting on my local laptop, but I can upload this entire static HTML page and related JavaScript files on a S3 bucket, so that this can become a statically hosted website on S3. Again, no website is hosted on S3, not on EC2, no servers involved. So once it is there, then it will have a unique URL to it, which anybody from anywhere across the world can open. Right now I'm showing you from my local, but once it works and I verify it works, I'll try to upload to S3, then anybody who has the link will be able to retrieve the information. So let me put the tracking ID which I would like to retrieve on. This was webinar. So now it does some backend communication with AWS. It was able to fetch the detail. It was able to plot the latitude, longitude on a map, and also talked to Google APIs behind the scenes to do some reverse geolocation queries. It was able to, as you can see, I just entered my latitude and longitude, but it was able to figure out that this belongs to this address, this road, and certain location in Bangalore. So I have been interacting with multiple services, including AWS services like DynamoDB and outside services like Google Maps, and all being done through serverless code, JavaScript code running directly on my browser. Right. So this is very powerful approach to design applications and build serverless setups. So that was just one quick example I wanted to give you where this entire thing was possible without involving any kind of EC2 instance in the picture. Right. So I'll stop sharing the screen. Let me go back to the presentation. Okay, so probably that this is a time where I'll open the floor for questions. But before that, there's one surprise element that I had for you guys. So Kopal asked me to, present it to you guys, and let me just show it to you. So, like we told, CloudDat is a training and consulting company. So we have our trainings planned for this month, and as an early bird offer, anybody who has attended this webinar, and if you fill the feedback form, the link of which you'll be getting after this webinar, you are eligible to get some early bird offer on our training prices. So what you see on the screen is the calendar for August. We have been conducting trainings for multiple topics related to some general fundamentals of cloud computing, to Amazon specific topics and Microsoft Azure specific topics. Few of these trainings actually map to the certification exams of AWS and Azure. So in case you are interested, feel free to fill the feedback form, and you can get back to us, and we'll be happy to help you with this. Yeah. So I'll open the floor for questions. I have already been given few questions. So Rajendra has asked, in with this programmer can deploy directly. So where is work for admins? Okay, that's a very good question. So when we say serverless, it, like I said, first of all, there are servers behind the scenes, but if you are not behind the scenes, you are on the client side, you don't get to manage server, they still work for you, because not every type of workload can be enabled with serverless designs. First of all, I told you some eligible workloads, there can be few more of them, but definitely they can be such kind of workloads. But at the same time, you can also upgrade your skills and move to a domain which is this is becoming very popular, called DevOps, which is a very good domain for admins. This is where you do a lot of automation on top of infrastructure. That's the direction we are going towards, or industry is going towards, and that's the direction serverless is pointing you towards. Because essentially, when you have a lot of functions and a lot of interaction happening, then there should be some way to automate this entire process and orchestrate it in a better way than doing everything manually or using some frameworks like serverless, the one I showed you. So yes, admins are still required, because you are the guys who have understanding of the infra and understanding of the performance aspects of the infra. I hope that answers the question. Parsuram had a question. He's written, what is the impact on traditional software QA when we move on cloud platform? So QA, when we talk about QA, it can be from, look into from two perspectives. You are doing quality testing on the infrastructure, or you are doing quality testing on the application. So whenever application is concerned, there's not major change into it. Essentially, whether application is deployed on a physical server or it's deployed on a cloud server, it does not make a major impact. Yes, there would be few things for sure. But at the infra level, for QA guys, you'll have to learn about doing load testing, because the idea is that your cloud infra will expand or scale depending upon more incoming load. So you cannot use a standard load testing practices that you use JUnit or JMeter and try to create 1,000 virtual users, because if you create 1,000 virtual users, your cloud will scale the backend and it will have more capacity available for your application. So that's one aspect of it. Then you'll need to understand the security aspect of it. So performance, load testing, security, automation. Specifically, when the QA team is involved into the entire DevOps pipeline, automation is very primary there. So yeah, all of them will still be applicable on cloud. Rakesh has asked, can you show where or how you have written or uploaded code in Lambda or API Gateway? Yeah, I can show that to you. Probably I'll need to share my screen again. So I'm into my management console, AWS management console, and they have two different services which I've interacted with. One is API Gateway, the other is Lambda. So let me first show you the API Gateway. That's the first touch point where my REST client is communicating to. So I have multiple APIs created, but this is the one which points to the project or the demo I gave to you. It's called IoT2, and I have two different methods or two different resources defined into it, pull and push. So when I use Postman REST client, I actually invoke the push API. And when I retrieve the value from a static web page, I invoke the pull API. So both of them are doing something. If I look at the post request of the push method, so essentially, I cannot go through all of this configuration, but the important point to note here is that whenever I invoke the post request on the push method, it somehow goes to one of the Lambda function with the name of which is given in the extreme right. It's called IoT push and some variables being passed to it. So this goes to a Lambda function and sends whatever data I have sent to API Gateway. API Gateway forwards that event or that data to Lambda. That's where my actual processing is happening. That's where my code is running. I can show you the code probably directly in a text browser. So I am using serverless framework, the one that I gave you the example of the GitHub project to create my push and pull method. So this one is actually pretty simple one. What I'm saying is that whenever you receive a data, I'm sorry, I think that's not the right one. Yeah. So IoT2 was my project, and I've created two methods into it, push and pull. So under my push method, that is my function which does a lot of things. This function was written in Python, and basically it is accepting certain event. Now this event is being pushed by API Gateway to my Lambda function. What you see on screen is the implementation of my Lambda function. So I take that event, I read values through it, values of it. I create a DynamoDB client through something called Boto3, which is a SDK available, Python SDK available for Amazon. And then somehow I iterate over that data and do something with it. And in the end, this is the important statement which says table.putItem. So what I'm saying is that inside this table of DynamoDB, insert one of my data point which I have processed in the lines, the code lines above. So that's a very short code. As you can see, this is hardly 70 lines. But this does exception handling, this does error checking, this returns errors in case something goes wrong or if data is not valid. So this entire thing is written in 70 lines. It's available as a Lambda function now, which can be executed whenever the API gateway sends an event to the Lambda function. So Siddesh has asked a question, can we host Windows application on serverless, a WordPress application on serverless architecture? The quick answer is no, because your WordPress application will expect you to have a PHP server running. So it's a PHP based application, it requires a LAMP stack. So essentially it's an ideal candidate for to run on an EC2 instance. So you cannot, and I also told that Lambda functions cannot be kept up and running for a very long time. So they'll be killed in 5 minutes. So it's not a right candidate. Rajendra has a question, what skills do we need to go in future DevOps? So Rajendra, for the time being, I'll give that question a pass. It's not directly related, but probably you can drop us an email and we'll answer that to you. How do we implement CI/CD? So again, this question is indirectly related, not directly. But CI/CD is possible here as well, because essentially what CI/CD is trying to do is to ensure a faster delivery pipeline for you. So whatever your developers are writing should become deployed, or should get deployed to your production infrastructure as fast as possible, passing through multiple quality gates and automation tests and multiple other things, build test and integration test, whatever it is. So essentially, when we have a serverless design, we improve this entire CI/CD process to make the delivery pipeline fast, because then we don't have to spend time in provisioning of hardware, configuring hardware, installing the right firmware and middleware and environment runtime onto it. So yes, serverless does support CI/CD indirectly. Rakesh has asked, in case of Lambda function, do I need CloudFront for faster response to client? The answer is yes, you can use that. For example, the locator website, which I showed you, probably right now it's a very simple web page with some text and few CSS styles and blue color background. But we might have some images, embedded images, or some video files of some static media which is heavy. So it can make sense for you to use CloudFront along with Lambda and API Gateway to make your static website fast. The first slide talked about, so that's a question from Naveen. He says the first slide talked about evolution of computing. How do you see evolution of IT sysadmin roles? I think a lot of people here are concerned about the job security, but don't worry, guys. None of the major technological revolution that has happened in past have left us jobless. So whether you see computing revolution that came after industrial revolution, people thought that the jobs might go away, computers will do everything, but don't worry about these things. So essentially, yeah, your responsibilities will change, and it's a good idea to adapt and learn the new technologies and be on the cutting edge. So yeah, we'll be happy to help you out in that case. Dinesh has a question. He says, is this serverless architecture is applicable for small scale applications like mobile app and web pages, or it can support very huge scale applications, say like ERP app? So the quick answer is, the first one is right. It does support small applications. So if your mobile app, so definitely you cannot build Android application, but if your mobile app is just a HTML page and some HTML page in mobile sizes display, so yeah, you can do that. ERP applications are very complex, and the idea is, when we build serverless, as you would have seen from one of the slides, it says keep your functions small, and keeping them small and keeping them independent requires a good amount of designing and planning around it. So ERP applications are large and complex, and they might have very intricate ways of doing internal communications. So I would say ERP applications probably at the time being are not the right candidate for serverless. Deepak says, is serverless architecture can work for high traffic websites and support 10 to 20 minute page views traffic? Also, we need to know it can support PHP based websites. So currently PHP is not supported, only Java, Python and Node.js. And to answer your first question, see, when you say and support 10 to 20 minutes of page views traffic, so essentially what you're really saying is that a person who came to my index page or home page took, let's say, 2 minutes to read it and clicked on a link to go to the second page. So essentially it's a second call. So your application code need not to wait for this person to click somewhere and just keep up and running, just wait for 2 minutes for this person to take any activity. That's the beauty of serverless, because then you can keep these things distinct, and you no longer need to keep a connection alive. So Lambda and API Gateway, by the way, don't give you live long-lived persistent connections. So it has to be a request response model. So whenever the person clicks on the second link or different page of the website, you invoke a second request, and then this second request invokes a second Lambda function, or different invocation of the same Lambda function. We have another question. It says, most of the companies are in their migration phase, transforming from old technology to new technology. How easy or hard is it for them to consider serverless architecture? I would say it is good idea to start considering it right now, at least for known critical applications, because for any organizations to adapt a new technology or a new platform, it's always a good idea not to do from production. So if you are already in migration phase, try to pick some known critical business applications which you can experiment with serverless, that will give you enough skill set inside the company to learn more about it, understands the do's and don'ts, and understands the pros and cons, so that you can think of deploying more modules and more complex applications into serverless design. Okay, so Aditya has a question. I'm developing an Android application where users will be clicking their pictures and sending it across for another user who once logs into the web portal or Android to analyze and give comment. This is also PHP based algorithm running background to analyze the user's input. Can I use serverless for this architecture? So the use case is compatible. Yes, you can use serverless, but not the language. If you can write the same logic in one of the compatible languages, then yes, it will work. Aditya has a question. We have already done that. So another one from Dinesh. I think we are, yeah. So I guess we have taken care of all your questions. Just in case, guys, if you feel that something is left out, or you have probably further questions after this webinar, you can email us on the sales address or the address that you had in your webinar confirmation email. So you can email back to us and we'll reply back there. Yeah. And we'll also be sharing the link of the feedback form to you guys over the email and also over the chat. So we would request you guys to please fill the feedback form. We would like to hear from you how you like the session and what kind of improvements you would like to see in future. And if there are any further topics you would like us to come back to you with more information, yeah, we can do that. All right. Thank you everybody for your time. I'll take your leave now. Have a good day. Hope to see you sometime soon.